everybody, this is Sandy from Sandy's Poema. Welcome to my class on color theory from A to Z. I recently did a workshop on this topic and we had such a fun time. The recording is right there on my YouTube channel. However, because I made it an interactive class, everybody was talking and we were all sharing. And it dawned on me that if you go to just watch that video and you weren't a part of it, it may be really distracting with that audio track included. So I decided to break the workshop down into 4 different lessons and make 4 separate videos of them so they're not too long, all in a series from 1 through 4, and we study a different topic relating to color in each one, and the total of all these 4 together is what we covered in the big workshop. So I'm welcoming you here. I hope this really helps you with your color choices, with your card making. Those of you who are new, welcome to my channel. Those of you who have been around for a while, I hope you'll watch this too, and just to be able to refresh what we learned in our workshop. And please leave comments below and like it if you do like it. And please think about subscribing to my channel. I would really appreciate it. So with that, let's get going. In this first class, we're going to be looking at the color wheel itself. We're going to be learning why the colors are located where they are and how they're all interrelated with each other. Believe it or not, the first person to arrange colors in this color wheel was Sir Isaac Newton in 1704. I had no idea until I started doing research for this, and I just wondered where the color wheel came from. Well, it turns out that Newton was looking at light, and he was studying light coming through a prism, and he began to see relationships between the colors, and he's the first one that put it into a color wheel. And I also learned that he set musical tones based on the different frequencies of light waves with each color, which I'm no scientist and I don't know how he did that, but I think it's pretty cool that he set music tones to the light wave speed for each color. I'd like to know what music tones he associated with each one. But anyway, that's just a little known fact, and I thought I would share it as we started our class together. So we divide these 12 basic colors into 3 main groups: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Tertiary sounds like a weird word, but it really just means third in line. So we have 3 main groups from these 12 colors. So the first one we're going to look at are the primary colors. The primary colors are red, blue, and yellow, and they're equally spaced around the wheel. Now these colors are called primary because no other 2 colors mixed together can make these colors. These are like basic colors that everything else comes from. So I put down here that all other colors on the color wheel come from these primary colors. And I would say that most of us learned this in elementary school, and we may even remember it, red, blue, and yellow. But all those other colors we may have some confusion on. So when we talk about primary colors, it's these 3 colors. Now the next section is secondary colors. I think these are really pretty. Violet, green, and orange. Violet is the same as purple, but on the color wheel it's called violet officially. So these colors are made by combining primary colors together. So for instance, red, which is a primary color, and yellow, which is a primary color, mix together to make orange. And red and blue, both primary colors, mix together to make violet or purple. And then blue and yellow make green. So a lot of us already know this as well. We know our secondary colors. It's when we get to the tertiary colors that we start getting confused. But basically we just need to remember that when we mix primary colors together, we get these 3 secondary colors. So there's 3 primary colors, red, yellow, blue, and there's 3 secondary colors, orange, violet, and green. But what about those tertiary colors? Well, let's look at those. There's 6 of those. And the way we get the tertiary colors is by mixing red, yellow, and blue, the primary colors, with the different secondary colors. So we mix red, yellow, and blue with orange, violet, and green. And when we do, we get 6 more colors. So it's really not complicated. It's just something we all need to know when we start thinking about colors. And if you were taking a painting class, and some of us do work with watercolors or other types of paints, if you're taking a painting class, you would be mixing your own paints to make these colors. So let's see what makes what. It goes with their color names pretty easily, so it's not too difficult to think about. Red, which is a primary color, and orange make red orange. That makes sense, but look at the color of red orange. It's not a bright orange and it's not a bright red. It's definitely just in between the two. Same with red and violet make red violet. Blue and violet make blue violet. That makes pretty much sense. But I want you just to look at the colors that are on this wheel. The blue violet, it's not totally purple and it's not totally blue. It's in between. That's kind of where the periwinkle color falls when we think about periwinkle. Okay, blue and green make blue green. Yellow and green make yellow green. Anytime I put yellow on here on these PowerPoint slides, I put a little gray behind it because you cannot see yellow on white. So that's why it has a little gray rectangle behind it. And then lastly, yellow and orange is yellow orange. Sometimes you'll see them orange yellow and sometimes you'll see it orange red or whatever and have them reversed. But I always put the primary color first when I label them. So here you have your 6 tertiary colors. So we have 3 primary colors, red, yellow, blue. We have 3 secondary colors that are made from mixing those primaries together, orange, violet, and green. And then when we mix the primary and the secondary together, we get these 6. Okay, so here is a color wheel. You can get a color wheel like this with these 12 colors around it I got mine on Amazon or any hobby store, Michael's, an art store, Hobby Lobby. They're really cheap. It's really good to have one because it will help you understand what we're learning with this, and it will help you pick out colors to use. When we get into lesson 2, we're going to look at all these different combinations of colors, and a color wheel will really help you in finding those combinations and remembering them, because there's no way you can really remember them all in your head. So having a color wheel with these 12 main colors on them it's really a good idea to invest in one. Okay. So here's some other things. So the first one is a hue. And a lot of times we hear the word hue, but we have no idea what it's really talking about. At least that's the case with me. I don't know about with you, but a hue refers to the name of one of these 12 colors. So here's all the colors on the color wheel, and their names are their hue. A hue is the name. So we have red or blue or violet or blue violet. Those are hues. Now check this out. This is really cool. A tint. Sometimes when you go to buy paint, they talk about the tints, using a tint of a paint or whatever. Anyway, a tint is when white is added to a hue and it makes the color lighter. So this little diagram I have down here is red. And if you look at the far left of that, it's bright red, total red. But as we go out to the right, on the end, it's very pale. Well, what they've done to make all these colors is add different amounts of white to pure red. So they take the hue of red and then they add a little bit of white and a little bit more white and a little bit more white. And as they do that, it gets paler and paler. And what you can see is that pink is actually a tint of red. It's not a separate one of those 12 colors on that color wheel because it's actually a tint of one of the primary colors. So a tint is lighter. So all those shades of pink are tints of the hue red. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Let's look at this next one. A shade is when black is added to a hue. So first we have a tint, which is when white is added to a hue. Then we have a shade when black is added to a hue, and that darkens the color. That makes sense, doesn't it? White is really light. You mix it with a color, it's going to make the color get lighter and lighter. Black is very dark. You're going to mix it with a color, and it's going to make it get darker and darker. So if we're looking at blue, and you go, maybe 2/3 of the way across this line of blue, you're going to come across a shade that looks like navy. Guess what? Navy blue is a shade of blue. That's because blue, the purest form of blue, which is shown on the left-hand side, gets darker when you add black to it. And when you add black to it a certain amount, it becomes navy blue. In the same way, if we're still thinking about blue, think about the pastel blue that we use for little baby boys. Well, guess what? That's a tint of blue because they take the pure blue, add white, and as you add more and more white, it becomes more and more pastel. So pastel blue is a tint of blue, and navy blue is a shade of blue. Now, I know this seems really technical, and we're going to talk in a minute about how you can help yourself and you don't have to memorize all this, but I want you to understand it. You don't need to memorize it. Just understand that when we talk about a tint, white has been added to the main color, the hue. And when we talk about a shade, black has been added to it. And then there's a third one. A tone is when gray is added. So this explains a lot about when you're working with different colors. Oftentimes we're not working with the main hue, with that bright, pure color. We're working with something that's pastel or something that's deeper because either white or black has been added to it to make that new color. And gray is a third one, which can add some sophistication. It's not that bright color, and it's not really dark, and it's not really light. It's kind of that medium one. Okay, so I want to show you this color wheel. Now this has more colors around it, but what's cool about this color wheel is that if you look at the top where it says red, it shows you pinks going all the way down. Or if you go to the right and you look at the red-orange column, it shows tints going all the way down. And you even see a double-ended arrow that says tints. So this color wheel doesn't just show the main color, the hue. It shows all of the tints. Well, maybe not all, because there's, lots of variables there, but it shows a lot of the main color of tints that can be made from each of these hue colors. So that when you're looking at a specific color of ink or whatever, you can look on here and you can see, oh, that's a tint of this color, of this hue. Now, if you look on the left-hand side of this color wheel, it says definitions. And you may not be able to read them, but you can in real life. And it actually has down there hue, another name for color. Tints, any color plus white. Tone, any color plus gray. Shade, any color plus black. So you don't have to totally remember it. You just have to understand what it's talking about. Now, I didn't take a picture of the reverse side of this color wheel, but on the other side, it's got tones and shades. So this is really helpful, and I would really suggest investing in both of these color wheels. They're about $5 or $6 each. I live in Alaska, so I buy a whole lot on Amazon because we don't have a lot of stores just to run right down to and buy it. Anyway, you can buy it at your local craft or art store, and you can buy it on Amazon. But either way, I would really suggest getting both color wheels because it will help you a lot when you're picking out your colors for your cards. So here's something else to think about. Value. Now, value is really important, and if you've done any quilting, you've thought about value before. You can't make your entire quilt or an entire picture be equally dark, like all dark. And you can't make something equally all light, because if you do, there's no contrast and it becomes far less interesting to look at. So if you're picking out fabrics for a quilt, you're going to have a variety of fabrics, some of them really light, some of them very dark, some of them in the middle, so that you've got contrast going on. And we measure that concept of value in a grayscale. Well, wait a minute. I'm doing my cards in color. How am I going to know what's what? How am I going to look at a grayscale and figure out if my card has any contrast or if there's, what values are in it? Well, what I would suggest is take your phone, if you have a smartphone, take a picture of your card, and then use the filter that's on your phone to change it to be black and white, to be on a grayscale. So I'll show you what I did. I happen to have this picture of this card that I made. I actually made it for my husband's birthday, and it has navy blue and copper embossing, copper metallic paper, and then a sentiment. And so I took it and put it into black and white. Now here in the black and white, you can see that the navy blue turns out the darkest. Then the copper is kind of mid-range on the grayscale, and the sentiment is on the lighter end. So I would consider this card pretty balanced. It's got some from the dark, some from the middle, and some from the light. So can you see how much easier it is to see that value scale when it's in the gray tones instead of in the color? If you look at the color, I like the look of this card personally, but I couldn't tell you about the value necessarily with my own eyes, like the colors. I'm not sure how they all fit together, but when they go into the grayscale, then I can see that. So this is to talk about contrast. Do our colors have contrast between them, or does everything just look kind of middle range and there's no focal point, there's no spot to have your recipient, their eye doesn't go anywhere, it just kind of roams around because it's all the same kind of color? You really need to have values, and so that means some lights and some darks, some mid-range, and the easiest way to find out is this way, by changing it to black and white. So I hope that that's a hint that will help you. And we're in these 4 classes, we're going to be going over this material over and over. So don't get overwhelmed. You have these to refer back to, and it's going to be just fine. And the last thing we're going to talk about is saturation. Saturation refers to the purity or the intensity of the color, and you can see on this graph the high saturation is on the left where it's just completely saturated, and then the low saturation is on the right. So I have some examples here. Okay, look at this one. Low saturation here is on the left, and the bright saturation is on the right. But think about this. What would happen if your entire card was either on the far left or the far right? On the far right, you could get so totally overwhelmed with all of that deep color that it would just be kind of too much. And if it's on the far left, it's just dull, dull, and dull. So you don't want to do either. You want to do a combination, just like when we're talking about value. Now look at this one. This is a painting. Why did this artist make all those poppies a really deep saturated red and the rest of the painting middle to light saturation, middle to low saturation? It's because he wanted those poppies to stand out. When you do something that's totally saturated like that, the person who is looking at it, their eye is drawn to it. So when we're talking about making a focal point of a flower or whatever on our cards, we want to have that part be more saturated than the background colors or than the other colors on the card, because we want somebody's eye to be drawn right to that point. So hopefully you can see that on this painting, that's exactly why this artist picked that bright red. And everything else, like the green, it's not totally saturated, it's dulled down, the sky is light, everything, the trees are dark, but they're dark enough that they're not that bright saturation of bright green leaves. Everything makes your eye be drawn to that highly saturated flowers, and that's what the artist wanted. So that's what saturation does. Let's look at this picture. Here are two sets of parrots. One, the whole picture is highly saturated. The other is all low saturation. So what if we did this picture over and we did the parrots highly saturated from the left-hand side, and we mixed it with the low saturated background on the right-hand side? That's where you get the balance. So you want the point, your focal point, to be the high saturation and the rest of the picture to be less saturated, because that's what draws your eye to specific elements. Isn't that cool? Now probably some of you know that. You might be experienced artists, but I know that there's a lot of you out there that didn't know that. And that is something really cool to know when you're making your cards. Take your focal points and make something saturated in the color. It doesn't even have to be bright, but just make it more saturated than the other elements in your card. Okay, so we're done with lesson 1 already. Let's review what we talked about. First of all, the relationships between colors can be represented on a color wheel. And we looked at the color wheel, and we looked at 2 different color wheels that you can purchase for yourself to help you as you move forward in learning about color. There's 12 hues on the basic color wheel, those main colors. These 12 hues can be split into 3 categories: primary, secondary, and tertiary. The primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. And they're called primary because, why? Because no other colors combined can make those 3 colors. Those are the base colors. The secondary colors are made from combining the primary colors together. And those are orange, green, and violet. And the tertiary colors are made by combining the primary colors with secondary colors. So take a minute to look at that on your screen. You could even do a screenshot if you want to remember that. Okay, let's move on. Tints are produced by adding white to hues. Shades are produced by adding black to hues. Tones are produced by adding gray to hues. We want to check the value of our cards by taking a photo of it, using a filter to turn it into grayscale, and then we can see if it has a balance between the dark, the light, and the middle. And finally, we want to balance the saturation so that our focal points has more saturation so that people's eyes will be drawn to it. Hopefully that makes total sense to you, but you can watch this as many times as you want. And if you need help, just put a comment down below and I will answer you individually if you feel that you're confused about something and it doesn't make sense to you, because I want you to learn this. Okay? So I will see you next time. in Lesson 2, and we're going to have fun looking at color harmonies. Bye for now.